Hello and welcome to today's video. So this time we're going to be taking another look through my large format hardbacks and British annuals and giving them all a clean. This time round we got the very start of my vintage Star Wars and related annuals and books, so I'm very much looking forward to having another look through them after all these years. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's take a look. Okay, so we're starting off with this one, which is the Hammer Vault, and it is an absolute beauty of a book. Now, slightly unusually, I think what I'm going to do, you can see this has got a line of dust where this one's been laid flat. So I'm going to get my duster here, which is actually in a bit of a sorry old state, so I don't think we're going to be able to go much further beyond this video without giving it a change. But I'm actually, because I bought this book brand new, I know it's going to not have any sort of internal marks, but the cover needs a polish. You see all this dust here? So just looking at that, look, it just goes right through it. So that little layer of dust which was formed while this one's been laying flat is just gone with a few wipes of my duster here. And I'll do the polish on these, and then I'll on this one anyway, and then I'll go through and give it the brush around the spine and that. But this was a really, really great book. It was like a companion to the Hammer story. It's the same author and published by Titan, and absolutely fantastic, filled with like bits of memorabilia and reproductions of the posters and the lobby cards and other bits and pieces, scripts and things like that. Really, really terrific book. I think it's still in print, but you know, just flicking through here you'll get an idea of what a fantastic book this one is. Really, really great. Lots of publicity stills and making ofs and things like that. What a collection this chap must have. Really, really terrific. And what a studio Hammer was, you know, I mean, one of the best. Certainly one of my favourites. So this is a great, great book. Now the only other thing we're going to need to do with this is just give the edges, but because it hasn't been stored like that traditionally, I don't think it's picked up much dust. Now there wasn't hardly anything coming off that. It was all off this this front cover here, which is now thankfully looking as good as it did when the book was published, which was probably quite a few years ago now, at least 10 years ago I would think. And to set my curiosity, let's have a look when this was published. 2011, there we are. So 12 years old. I'm sure you can still get this one, and if not, you know, there'll be copies around second hand. So let's slip that over there. The next one is another absolute monster of a book. This one is a graphic novel, in fact, and it's a French one. So I did actually pick this one up in France, and it's Judge Anderson, Shambhala, and it was by one of my favourite artists for Judge Anderson, which was Arthur Ransom, written by Alan Grant. And over in France, the books were, they call them biddies, graphic novels, and they often publish them in hardback, and that's what this is. And because it was one of my favourite Anderson stories, when I came across this one in France, I didn't want to turn it down. As you can see, it's just gorgeous, gorgeous artwork. I really, really like Arthur Ransom. He's fantastic. So that's why I picked this one up. I've got like a British version of this, but it was so nice to have this one in the hardback form. 1994. Yeah, look at that. So once again, I'll do the edges, and then we'll give it a polish. And I think that's probably the best way to work through these. We'll just create, I've got one big pile here that you can't see, and we'll just build a pile up over there. And on these, because they're nice shiny jackets, they can spray directly on without fear of any sort of damage. Now this one did actually have, as I said, it's never been cleaned, and it was second hand when I bought it. I bought it in the late 90s from a comic shop in France, so it's not mint. And there were a few, like here we are, reading marks down this foredge here, but they've come off really, really well, as these things tend to do, because the covers are nice and glossy. It means the polish just slides through any sort of dirt, and quite unusual to have the Frenchman's. I don't know quite how popular Judge Dredd or the worlds of Judge Dredd was in France, but evidently it warranted the Judge Anderson stories to be printed over there, which is cool. But yeah, this had loads of marks on it in actual fact, which are coming up quite nicely. Yes, we got just a handful of graphic novels this time round, and then we're on to what will be quite a big run of Star Wars related books and annuals. But that's that's lovely. Not sadly an Arthur Ransom cover, which would have been perfect, wouldn't it? Now this one, I can't imagine this is in much of a state. This is Slain the Horned God, and it's a fantastic that painted artwork by Simon Bisley. Really terrific. Now this book was actually remaindered back in the day, if you can believe it. And Slain the character was always like 2000 AD's version of Conan, really, you know. Lots of similarities. But it was a popular character. I don't know if it's still going. And Simon Bisley, well, he was sort of one step away from real greatness when this one came out. And he went on to do, well, apart from this being one of his all-time classics, he did do the Arkham Asylum, which was a very popular Batman graphic novel when it was published. With that he's got that really distinctive artwork style, that painted artwork style. But yeah, this one was remaindered, I think. Yeah, when it was new, it was supposed to be £20. And I remember we were picking copies up when I had the shop for, well, the wholesale on it was about £4 a book. And we used to sell it for a tenner, I think. So it was like half price. Maybe they expected it to sell better than it actually did in the end, I don't know. But I always liked it. I think it was this was the definitive edition of it, really, you know. Absolutely fantastic tome. And I've still got, to this day, a very soft spot for 2000 AD. I really have. I've always loved it. Right, now we got a little run of, well, they did 3 volumes of The Adventures of Luther Arkwright. They came out in comic book form. Then Bryan Talbot released the 3 large format graphic novels. Then eventually it had the 1 volume edition. So I've got the 3 here. I think this one actually is the earlier version of volume 1 with the Michael Moorcock introduction. And yeah, the earlier volumes are always famous for falling to bits. I remember that actually. And that's that one's actually signed. For Jules, signed on all parallels, Bryan Talbot. How cool is this? But it is falling to bits, so I'm thinking, and this was always the case with this particular one, the glue was a bit awful. We have the power to clean this up a little bit, and we can re-glue it. It may not be perfect, but it'll be better than it falling to bits. So I'll just clear this up inside first of all, if I can, as best I can. Yeah, this is probably one of the very earliest graphic novels I ever bought, in all honesty. I reckon it probably was, you know. Definitely at some point in the 80s I picked this up, and I remember doing a convention in I think 88 which Bryan Talbot attended for 2000 AD's 10th anniversary in Plymouth, and Bryan Talbot was there, and I have a feeling this is when I picked this one up, I think. But you know, the memory does cheat slightly, doesn't it? Well, that's about as good as we're going to get that. So it needs re-gluing. Let's just... Fortunately, the first few pages are detached, but at least this will keep it as together as we possibly can make it for the time being. Not ideal, but it is what it is. Not that it's a mega collectible or anything, but it is signed, and if you've never read Luther Outcry, it's a great story, really, really great. I very much enjoyed it. There we are. So, not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than what it was, which was literally fall apart in your hands. In all honesty, I think for a book like this sort of size, something a bit more substantial glue-wise is probably required than just a little Pritt stick, but the Pritt stick will stop it getting any worse, shall we say, you know. So there we are. And then they got republished as 3 volumes, which are these 3. It's got a different jacket on. I'll give you an idea of the artwork there. And I think after the initial, these are the bits I like, after the initial sort of publication, I think, look at that, years later, Bryan Talbot went back and actually redrew some of this to get it up to like an even better standard. But, you know, apart from, the first edition was December 82, which must have been that one. And this reprint was in August 89. And then eventually Dark Horse printed it in a 12-part series. They printed the whole lot. But yeah, if you've never read it, I do recommend it as a series to try. But you can get the 1-volume edition now from Dark Horse, and that would be the way I would suggest you sample it nowadays. It's a little bit smaller, but I think initially it was published as part of the as part of an underground fanzine, not an underground comic rather, which was called Near Miss. And that came out in the late 70s and early 80s. So Bryan Talbot, I think, started as a writer on that. So it was quite sort of spaced out and a bit of a druggy underground comic called Near Miss. That, I'm pretty sure, was how Luther Arkwright started. And then it became something even bigger than its origins later on, you know. Now 2 and 3 are a little bit thinner, so I'm going to give them the brush off together. But once again, these were stored flat, so they haven't actually picked up much dust falling on them. Yeah, great stuff. Amazing to think these are 35 years old now. Don't think about it. But absolute classics, once again. These don't seem in too bad shape at all, to be honest. And I've got these sort of shelved near my Judge Dredd graphic novels, of which I've got a whole shelf of those, and we'll eventually have to do them as well, of course. They are in mixed conditions. Some of the Judge Dredd graphics I bought brand new. They were remaindered, so I picked them up. The ones published by Titan Books, but I got later ones by Fleetway and people like that, and I did try and get them all. Nowadays, of course, with Judge Dredd, you can get the Chronicles of Judge Dredd, and where they reprint them all in order. And obviously that's probably the best way to read them. There we are. One last flick through of volume 3. You see the graphic style improves as the series goes on, because it was done over many years until it got put into book form. But fantastic, eh? Great stuff. I've got a page of original Bryan Talbot artwork from Hellblazer, the American comic Hellblazer, which I really like. Okay, now speaking of Judge Dredd, we do have a few Judge Dredd books. Once again, these have been stored flat. Now this one here and the other ones we've got, these were the newspaper strips that were published, I think, in the Daily Star. And they were little strips like that. They may have been the Sunday, one of the Sundays. But this was the whole lot put into one book. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Used a lot of the key Judge Dredd artists of the time. Ron Smith was the chap, wasn't he? And Wagner and Grant were the authors. And this was the one volume edition. And then in a minute we'll have a look at the individual editions that came out, which were in much softer, or soft cover ones, having these all in hardback. And I actually read some of these fairly recently and I thought they were really terrific. So they still hold up really well, considering they had just such a small area to work with. You know, they had about 8 panels or something, you know, so they did very well, all things considered. But this one, once again, it's only £6.95. What a great book for that sort of money, eh? But that was, this would have been in the, I suppose, in the 90s. This got published. It's worth having a look, isn't it? October 1990. Blimey O'Reilly, 33 years ago. It looks like it's brand new, doesn't it? But prior to that, the comic strips were published in these, and I've got them all. Now these, in actual fact, they're not glossy. They're more like, almost like magazine covers. And this was the 5 that they did. There's number 2 and there's number 1. And they were just the same as what got put into the book. But this was the first time that they were pulled together. I think they actually read slightly better because these are bigger than the book format. But we can't polish these, but I can at least give them a brush. Now, the first 3 are slightly larger, so I'll do these 3 first. But as I said, they've been stored flat, so I don't think there's much wrong with these at all. There we are. Okay, so that's Judge Dredd. Now we've got just one odd Star Trek book. My other Trek books are to come, but for some reason this one was just a precursor to the Star Wars ones that we've got coming up. This is a really good book. You might recognise the names Herbert F. Solow and Robert Justman. 2 guys who worked on the original show. This is actually a great book. I've read this one right through. It's good to see their viewpoint from the original creators, or part of the original creation team, I should say. And they're very much responsible for the look of it. And this is one of the better non-fiction Star Trek books, making of books, and one that definitely is worth tracking down. It has picked up a fair bit of dust on the top there. Yeah, a little bit of spotting on it, but nothing too serious, to be honest. And the wrapper actually looks pretty nice anyway, so, but I'll give it a cursory wipe. I've had this one since brand new. And it is one of the better ones. I like it anyway. There we are. There's those familiar names. You see them on the back. Herbert F. Solow and Robert Justman. Brilliant. Okay, well that's the first little wedge done. Now this one, I don't remember much about this. Star Wars Where Science Meets Imagination. It is a Lucasfilm book. I mean, back in the day, sort of throughout most of the 1990s and early 2000s, I would buy pretty much every Star Wars book that got published. And consequently, I have got quite a run of them. But most of the fiction and the paperbacks and that I did get rid of. I just didn't have the room, and I wasn't really reading them, you know, so when it gets to that stage, I tend to knock it on the head. And give this a clean, but it looks pretty much brand new to me. Now, a bit of duster is particularly dirty, so we'll give it a fresh bit. There we are. That was pretty nice, that one anyway. Now this one's unusual because this is Japanese, and I suspect this is a making of The Phantom Menace in Japanese. That is my suspicion. It's completely different to the British language one or English language one. I'm not 100% sure how I got hold of this, but it's pretty unusual, isn't it? I don't have much Japanese stuff in my collection, Star Wars wise, you know, but I have a few bits, and this is one of them, so it is what it is. Definitely unusual, probably fairly scarce over here, and maybe fairly scarce in general. I think the cover though looks alright to me. I don't think it needs much of a wipe over, because of course I've never read it being in Japanese, but the cover on the back, the all white cover, it seems alright to me. Don't think it's picked up any dirt, which is the main thing. Yeah, what a lot of hype there was around the Phantom Menace, eh? Boy oh boy. Right, the Star Wars Technical Journal. Now, this is the American printing by Del Rey, and as I recall, this brought together, I think maybe 2 or 3 magazines that were originally published by Starlog and put them into a book form. I think that's what this one's doing. Now I can see some wear on the front jacket there, but let's have a little look inside. And what would often happen is we would have the American editions of some of the Star Wars books in the shop before the British ones were even published. And I think that's what the case was with this, because I believe this book, October 95, first American edition, this book got published in the UK by Box Tree a little bit later, you know. But this would have been the first English language printing of it. And we did have people who would come in and buy any of the new Star Wars books as they were published, because we specialised in that sort of thing when we had the shop, and that's why we would have kept this one in stock. And already that's actually brought that one up to be absolutely gleaming again, which is lovely. A really nice sort of metallic jacket on it. That's lovely, yeah. Right, now this one, I was surprised to see I actually had this, because I didn't think I picked up much of this stuff. So this was the making of the Phantom Menace. Little flyer from Random House. That would have been from the rep, I guess, detailing all the new books coming out. This is the British edition. There they all are. So not bad. So again, it's picked up, and it's almost 30 years. It's picked up a little bit of dust. much. And I think that lovely golden logo, I think a bit of a spray, that'll come up absolutely fine. But I know coming up we've got a run of the original British annuals, which I can't really remember the condition of them. So I know for a while they were very common. You used to be able to get almost all of them without too much trouble. But certainly in recent years, I don't think you see them very often. There we are. It's lovely. Now, this one actually is a re-release. I don't know if we've got the originals of these, but they did Star Wars storybooks for the first 3 films, and then random put all 3 of them together and just renumbered them so that you had the whole original Star Wars trilogy in one book. And these storybooks are absolutely fantastic. I really, really loved them. This was a US edition as well, and I was looking for a publishing date. It does look like 1987, and it actually says on the front, the first 10 years. So I can only assume that this was published in 87. So one of those scarce items that came out after the trilogy had really sort of peaked first time round, But that's okay. This is when I was really into Star Wars. I was going around picking up all the old toys and books and comics, anything I could get my hands on between 85 and 90. It was, in fact, 85 to 92 was pretty much the wilderness years for Star Wars. And people were sort of sick of it, really, and they'd moved on. And people were very much into the hot new things, Thundercats and Masters of the Universe and Transformers. That's what I remember from that sort of period. There's another one, the Illustrated Star Wars Universe. Oh, this looks nice. Art by Ralph McQuarrie and Kevin Anderson's text. This is nice, isn't it? Oh, look at that. No, I had no idea, and it's signed. That's Ralph McQuarrie's signature, although it's the abbreviated one. I actually met Ralph McQuarrie, and I got a few bits signed by him, the original Star Wars portfolios. I had no idea that this was like a signed version of it. So that's Ralph McQuarrie, and that must be Kevin Anderson then, Kevin J. Anderson. Well, sadly, Ralph McQuarrie's no longer with us, but what a nice guy he was. And I wonder if this has just been popped inside, that bookplate is just inside the regular edition here at Bantam Books. Copyright 1995. So I think this is just an earlier one, which must have been just like a signed one that got released. It looks like a compilation of all his work. That's great. Yeah, so quite a surprise that. I didn't know I had that. And anything signed by McQuarrie is a good day, isn't it? Now, I did notice when we were flicking through that at the back, it looked like there was a bit of foxing there. You see that? Now you can sometimes wipe some of that off, just using the same method because the paper is quite glossy. But that is a shame. Some damp has got into there. It wouldn't have been how the books are stored today. It would have been how they were stored historically. It may have even had a bit of moisture in it when I first bought it. That is better. It's definitely improved it. But it's going to leave a mark still. But not the end of the world. It does look like that's the only page that's affected. There we go. Okay. Well, let's give the cover a polish. But that was pretty nice. That was an unexpected little bonus, that, to find that with that book plate inside. Very nice indeed. It's a shame that Ralph McQuarrie was just getting back into Star Wars. And he, as I said, he appeared at one show in the UK, which I was lucky enough to attend. And that was about it. And then I think he sadly passed away. And that was that. What a genius lost, you know. And there's not even that many like interviews with him or anything, you know. But there we are. Right. Now we're going well back in time to the very first British Star Wars annual. Look at that. Annual number 1. And this must have come out, I guess, in 1978 in the UK. 1978. Look, it's got a so it was £1.50, and it's got a British Home Stores label in for £1.25. Who remembers British Home Stores, eh? Okay, well, that's not too bad. There's no, I don't think the Star Wars annuals ever had like crossword puzzles or anything like that. So let's give that a brush down first of all, and then we'll give the cover a polish. It's not mint by any means. It's got some banged corners, which is a shame, because I'd say this was a very, very common annual, particularly, you know, in the 90s. I mean, I think it must have sold supremely well, you know, and copies are generally out there. So I don't think this goes for anything like big money, but there are a couple. I think one of the Ewok annuals, in fact, both the Ewok annuals are pretty scarce, but one of them is particularly scarce. Maybe because nobody actually ever bought it. Well, that's okay. I mean, that's as good as it's going to get, really, isn't it? You know, I mean, it's all right. Now, I always thought that this was the scarcest of the 3, but there is this one as well, which I think is actually even harder to get, because Star Wars had peaked and then it was on a bit of a low. But I think this is the second one, and that one actually has a bit of an odd price in. It's got £3.50 fine, number 2. So I don't remember where I bought this, but that looks like a dealer's price of some sort, you know. Okay, let's give the edges a brush. Right, let's have a proper look through. So, of course, all these annuals were just straightforward reprints from the American comics, and with a few pictures in. So some were better than others, you know. I'm just wondering if this was actually the 3rd annual. This one, no, it says 78 and 79. Oh, well, we'll have a look at the other one in a minute and see how that one's dated. I'm not sure, but I think it's the other one which is, I think, the harder one to find. This one I have definitely seen a few copies of over the years, you know. Big mark on the R there, but we've got that off now. There we are. That's all right. Now let's have a look at this one then. Better jacket. That actually looks like a Empire Strikes Back still. So when did this one get? Yeah, this is 81. So this was the 3rd one in actual fact. So fair enough. Unless the Empire we got the Empire Strikes Back annuals 1 and 2. So I think this perhaps was. That is correct. It's got a £2.95 in the top right corner, thankfully in pencil, so we'll get that rubbed out. brush. The cover does feel a bit dirty. It's never been polished. So it's going to benefit from that, that's for certain. Almost feels like a bit stained somehow, but I remember, when I would receive annuals like this at Christmas, because I always used to say, get me an annual, make sure you don't double up. So, so someone will get me the Doctor Who annual, someone will probably get me the Star Trek annual, and I'd usually get the Star Wars one as well. And then I'd just say make it up with like superhero ones, like Spider-Man or something like that. Yeah, this one's actually got loads and loads of dirt off, much more than... Look at that. It's actually quite... A lot of it was just invisible, though. I couldn't actually see what was coming off. That does feel much better now. It was almost like it had a matte finish on it, so I'm going to give it another one with a brand new sort of clean bit of cloth, because it was so bad. I think it almost deserved a second going over this one to be on the safe side. Yeah, quite a bit off that, but it's definitely okay now. Now, obviously after Star Wars came Empire Strikes Back, and they did 2 Empire annuals. This is perhaps the most classic one, and this came out in many formats, didn't it? Basically the comic strip adaptation. There's paperback, and there was a magazine, there was various one-shot comics, there was a 6-part comic, there was loads really. That's actually really, really nice, that one. That's a really nice copy of that. I'm pleased with that one. So, I remember being all over this as a kid. I did read the novel of Empire when it came out, because it was the first way you could actually know the story, was by reading the novelization. And it came out in a junior form and an adult form, and I didn't bother with the junior one. I just went straight for the adult one, and I remember absolutely loving it. Absolutely, I couldn't wait to see the movie, and it did not disappoint, because Empire Strikes Back ended up being my all-time favourite Star Wars film by a mile. Best soundtrack, great story, the effects are awesome, particularly at the end with the Rebel fleet. Oh, just incredible. Good stuff. Yeah, so for me, Empire is the way to go. And that is an extremely nice condition annual. I'm very, very pleased with that one indeed. And they did do a follow-up before Jedi, which was this one here, annual number 2. And this was the adventures after and the end of Empire, because Han and Chewie are in the background there, because of course Han was stuck in carbonite, and this one's much worse. Andrew Harvey, class 6. He dared to put his name inside. What a cheek. Apart from that, it's alright, so I'll make a little note that this one, I should potentially look for a better one, because this one turns up all the time. You see this around. So we'll give it the old polishing treatment. Yeah, a bit slightly disappointed it's got the name in, but I mean, it's not the end of the world, is it? You can sort of feel bits of dirt under the cloth, that you're wiping off, little dents in the cover and divots and that. But even so, I think those Star Wars annuals we've actually taken off far more than was perhaps visible. Right, now, I'm assuming this is the first Return of the Jedi annual. And this looks like the adaptation of the movie. Yeah, it's just the movie adaptation of the third film. Another great adaptation. Loved it to bits, this. And that looks absolutely fine. That's a nice copy of that one as well. So let's get the old brush. Find another fresh bit of cloth. This one's definitely needing another wash after this, after today's escapades. And believe it or not, I've got this much again in Star Wars books still to come, even after what we've pulled out today. Other Star Wars related books, and then we're on to sort of more general movie related titles as well. So still lots to come in the land of Star Wars. What I'm not bringing down, embarrassingly, I do have books which are still sealed from when I bought them. So all I'm doing with those is giving them, because they're absolutely fine inside, I'm giving them a dust over, but I'm not bringing them up to the studio here to film, because there's not really a lot of point, is there? But there we are. So that is absolutely fine. And they did do a second Return of the Jedi annual, which is this one, which I can only assume is they continue the adventures. This is 1984. Yeah, that all looks absolutely fine. Of course, in America, they just didn't have these hardback annuals. They had the Marvel, large format Marvel comics, the Marvel Super Special series, and they had some lovely tabloid comics as well. I had to just reset the camera there because we were getting near our time limit. So generally, I record in wedges of about 20 minutes at a time, and I'd just slightly gone over there, and I didn't want to interrupt, so quickly paused and then restarted. Yeah, there we are. That's a nice one. Now, the next one is actually a bit of a compilation. It says Star Wars Special Edition featuring Empire and Jedi. And this was produced for British home stores, I believe. Yeah, produced exclusively for BHS. That's British home stores if you're outside the UK. And this was the comic strip adaptations for Empire and Jedi put into one hardback annual, and my suspicion is it was probably the unsold ones from those two annuals. But boy oh boy, I don't believe you ever got this in the States, and just imagine if they'd have done all three. But the comic strip adaptation to the first film was never put into like this format, as best I know, but there was like a black and white paperback of it, which is not that good, to be honest. But yeah, there we are. So that's pretty good. Not the greatest. Well, I suppose the likenesses aren't bad. It's just the overall purple colour of it doesn't do it justice, does it? But it's not actually too bad. And I believe that is quite a scarce one, that one. Oh, did I do the edges? I don't think I brushed the edges down. So let's do that, just in case I manage to forget. There we are. Right, now the next two are obviously going to be the highlight of my collection, which is the two Ewok annuals. So these tied into the Ewok animated series, which was very much aimed at youngsters, and they did a few bits and pieces of memorabilia and what have you. In the UK, there was 2 Ewok annuals. Now, this one is by far the easiest one to get. There is another one which I have got, which I'll show you in next, and that one's much tougher to find. However, I believe both of them are fairly difficult to find these days. Also difficult to find is someone who actually likes the Ewok TV series, so that's also quite scarce in supply. But they are, ultimately they are part of the Star Wars story, and I didn't want to not include these in my collection. It's got a couple of cover marks here, but doing well in getting them off. There we are. Lovely. Okay, obviously highlight of my collection is the old Ewoks annual. Now this is the scarce one, and I think it really is quite scarce. It certainly took me a while. Once I found out it actually existed, it took me a bit of time to find one online, and it is blimmin' awful. It's actually got Star Wars reprints at the back there, and it's just the first half here is Ewoks related. Dear, look, this book belongs to Gerald Dunn in Bristol. Gerald, if this was your book, well, I pity you having to read that. A few little marks on it, which hopefully we'll get off in a sec. Yeah. Good thing about annuals is they are pretty easy to clean up. There's a little mark there, which I'm just going to give some special attention to. Hopefully get it up. And it is being quite stubborn. So there is another little trick where you can just dab a spit, put that onto the offending mark, get your soft rubber, and if you put your rubber on, like so, that can lift the offending mark, and it's pretty much done that. There you go. So there you go, there's another little trick for you there. So you see how that mark which was around there is now gone completely. The back, however, is also in a bit of a state because it's got a black cover. It shows up every little mark, and this one's got quite a few on the back here. So we'll give it the once over and see what's left, basically. A little bit around here, there was probably a sticker there of some sort, which we've now got off. Those are just printing blemishes. There we are. So that took a little bit of effort, but that's now as good as I think we're going to get it. And quite a scarce little annual. Now the last 3 aren't annuals at all. They're 90s books. So we got the Book of Scripts, Star Wars the Scripts. These are British, published by Box Tree. Pretty boring, that one, but we'll just give it the brush down. Oh, that's interesting. So it says accompanies the Fox video release of the complete Star Wars trilogy, and that's got those. I remember those when they came out. Those particular Star Wars video jackets. There we are. That's nice, that's cool. Right, the next two pretty much went hand in hand. You had the Essential Guide to Characters and the Essential Guide to Vehicles. Now, this one's the American Del Rey, and the other one's the British sort of box tree printing of it. And once again, these were ones which had magazine content that was published by, I believe, Starlog, and then put into book form. But they look pretty nice condition. So I suppose we've come to the end of this episode now, so we ought to have a little chat about next week. Well, you know, I haven't quite decided. I think it's overdue that we haven't done the Penguin main series. We haven't done another wedge of those for a while. So I think that's probably going to need to be the next batch to get done. So we'll go back to some vintage paperbacks. So look out for that next Saturday. And then after that, well, I've got to admit, I've been really loving going through all these large format books and sorting them out. And it was really nice to come across that signed one there, wasn't it? That was super cool. But we have got loads more Star Wars books to do. Or large format books in general. We've still got lots to do. So, I don't know. But I think next week, almost without fail, I'm going to try and do some more vintage Penguin paperbacks for you. Alright. But anyway, if you have enjoyed today's video, something a bit different, do please give it that thumbs up. If you've not already, do please hit the subscribe button for regular vintage book cleaning content. And I shall very much look forward to seeing you again next week with another video. Bye.